Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're playing Planet of Lana, the Eternal Castle Remastered, and, oh yeah, by the way, still a little bit of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, I've wrapped that up already. What are you doing still playing that game?
You're on your second playthrough?
Oh, yeah, second quest. All the Triforce pieces are different locations. I don't know if there are any Triforce pieces in this. Don't at me. It's not a spoiler if I don't know it's a spoiler.
I was enjoying the internet meltdown last week as people were sharing their deep in the game, late stage Zelda experiences and videos all over social media, and people like number one comment was all, "My brother in Christ, it's been less than a week."
Well, and were people actually spoiling stuff? Because the most
necessarily
what I've seen
stuff.
has just been like weird contraptions.
Yeah, yes, there's certainly a lot of that, but no, like any screenshot where somebody has 40 hearts and batteries are a thing in this game, and you've got 15 batteries across the bottom of the game, and I'm like, I'm over here with 3 hearts and 1 battery. Right. I die if the wind is too strong or if it rains too hard. It's a little fragile in the early hours, and people are way beyond my experience, I think.
I took that to mean that people were complaining and people were posting like in-game spoilers, not them remarking that like they had just put an unhealthy amount of time into the game already.
Yes, yeah. Just clearly playing, some version of 3D chess Legend of Zelda that the rest of us are not playing.
Yeah. No, I'm somewhere between those guys, and sounds like where you are.
How many hearts do you have?
I have 8 or 9 hearts.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I am sick of getting one-shotted in this stupid game. So I have just been like desperately seeking out shrines and getting the heart containers. But the joke's on me, I'm still getting one-shotted by everything. And I was reading some posts this weekend about people who have like done the opposite. They just put everything into stamina. So now they can just use the glider across the entire map. And I'm over here just getting killed in the little trash fights trying to get to the actual dangerous enemies. And thinking like, that might be the move. It might have been all stamina from the beginning.
Oops, all stamina. No, I don't know if I necessarily need a ton of stamina. I found that I've got enough of that to climb anything in general that I want to climb. If not, I can usually warp through the ceiling.
Do the ceiling warp.
Yeah, and I don't need to do a lot of like long distance gliding. I think I'm okay with the tools that I have for getting around. I'm sort of keeping my game pretty contained at this point. I have not gotten to the far reaches of the map. So, I definitely am, like you, very tired of getting one-shot killed. I got killed by a horse the other day.
What are you doing to the horse?
Just humiliating. If you don't sneak up on them the right way
they kick you or something like that.
They kick you in the face, and rightfully, I died of that.
Oh man!
I dropped a log on my head, and it killed me. So I'm like, I just need to.
Well,
get a little more hardy.
There's only one person you can blame for that.
Oh yeah, no, I think I posted on Twitter that I am the biggest villain in this game so far. I am the final boss, as it were. So
you drop a log on your head?
Yes, yeah. But yeah, no, definitely like you, I think feeling a little fragile. So spent some time over the last week trying to get some new armor and to unlock some more of those heart containers because I'm just tired of just dying all the time.
I feel like I'm right on the cusp of being able to just make it through an entire fight. Because, like, I've got all my hearts, I've got some new armor, I got it upgraded. I guess that's about it. I was gonna say I don't really cook food for like the buffs. I have a lot of heart restoring food. I really like cooking in this game is still just very cumbersome, so I try not to do a lot of that. But I think I'm getting to the point where I'm no longer getting one shot by most stuff, although it still happens more frequently than I would expect from a Zelda game. And I don't think I like it. I've kind of forgot that was an aspect of the whole Breath of the Wild kind of balancing.
I don't remember Breath of the Wild being quite so brutal. I think certainly the Guardians were tough, and there were some of the combat shrines that I would wade into where I was like, "Whoa, I am not ready for this." The occasional Lionel, but in general, I felt like I could hold my own in Breath of the Wild most of the time, and that has not been the case thus far in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I don't know if that is an actual change they made, like a decision that this one just needed to be more difficult, but I feel like they could just reduce damage across the board by 50%, and that would be a much more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I would like to survive 50% of the kicking in the heads by a horse.
Yeah. Well, I learned that lesson, I guess.
Yeah. No, I've got my one horse. I'm good. This is the horse I'm going to finish the game with, so I'm cool. I don't need any more horses.
Oh, okay.
Yep. But yeah, so yeah, it's definitely it's been a bit of a learning curve. I had a lot of hours in Breath of the Wild, and I feel like I'm sort of playing a whole new game here where I'm like, nope, I don't remember how any of this works or where I'm supposed to go or who I'm supposed to talk to. I landed in the map and went a completely different direction than I was advised to go, and was way out of order. And so I was, 10 hours in.
But this is like the very start. You went the wrong direction. Yeah, a different direction.
Yeah, from the very start, and didn't have a lot of the basic things like the paraglider or your first armor set or anything that, there's a collectible in the game, the Zonite charges, that I didn't know what they did until yesterday. I'm like, maybe I'm missing some context. Is there a tutorial I'm not doing? But there's definitely been a lot to discover in this game.
I really appreciate that it manages to feel that way, because that was one of my biggest fears, is that, I played Breath of the Wild, and it was very surprising, but how much of that are they going to be able to recapture this time? And the answer is, not all of it, but it has been very interesting, kind of like learning new systems, trying to like relearn how previous systems have changed, and just, having to deal with the whole stat reset at the beginning of the game, which is, kind of to be expected.
Right, yeah.
So there is, I feel like I probably touched on this last week, but there's still a lot of stuff that is still a surprise in Tears of the Kingdom, despite it being, on the same map and largely sort of the same systems and, mechanics interacting.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just fun to walk around that map. I feel like I wasn't familiar enough with it previously, so it feels mostly fresh.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, certainly, where I started the game is not where I started Breath of the Wild. So there is enough that I'm exploring that feels new and different and updated since, the events of the previous game. So, yeah, I don't have any complaints about that. And, I think I do like that. So much of it feels new. It sounds like a complaint when I say it, and it is kicking my butt a little bit because it is asking a lot of me as a gamer in a way that some games generally don't. But yeah, it's good. It's been a good time. I can't stop playing it. So that is a high endorsement, I think.
Yeah, that is my issue with it, is just I can't stop playing it. Or I can't stop just getting sidetracked by things. The issue is that there are things I want to do in this game, and they're mixed in with like a million other things that you can do in this game. And it's a problem because I'm trying to, as much as I like just wandering around aimlessly and discovering what's over the next crest of a hill, or seeing, is that a Korok down there or whatever, that sort of exploration, I do just want to get on with sort of the main storyline path through this thing. Mm-hmm. And the game makes it hard to do that. I feel like it is it's like the thing in Monster Hunter where I'm like, I have to go kill this monster. This is the next key monster I need to take down. But in order to kill this monster, I need to build the weapon that he's weak against. I need to build the armor set that will protect me from his attacks. And doing both of those things just opens up this whole separate branch of tasks I need to accomplish. And then suddenly it's like 10 hours later and I've forgotten, like, oh, who was I supposed to be hunting this whole time? And it's like that for everything in Tears of the Kingdom. So for instance, I just made it to the first sort of like large objective. It would be sort of the equivalent of those, the 4 mythic beasts or whatever from the first game.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I should get myself into better shape so I'm ready for this. So I left and I went and did the whole like heart container collecting and like armor upgrading thing. And then I went back to it later and I did it. It was fine. But then, so along the way, I unlocked the, what is it called? The Hero's Path thing, which was a feature from the DLC in Breath of the Wild. It was a thing that shows you where you have been on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And that, first of all, it's exciting that it's just in the game now, because previously you had to buy the add-on. And I had never tried it before. I didn't know that.
That's very cool.
Yeah, you'll run into it eventually.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, I want to try this out, because I never really played around with it before. So I just reset or rewound all the way back to the beginning, and I could sort of see where I was going. And I looked at it, and I said, here's where I reached that first dungeon, or whatever it is. And then I looked at the rest of the timeline, and it was a third of the way through the entire timeline. And I was doing this just after having completed the dungeon. So it means that out of all my time playing this game, 2/3 of it was just me trying to do stuff to get back to do the dungeon. And that's just been sort of like the experience so far. That's been the Tears of the Kingdom experience. It's like, I want to do this one thing, but first I have to do 100 other side things.
Yeah.
Before I can just focus and do the original thing.
Yep. Yeah, I have a very similar one. As I arrived at a location, and the character was like, "Oh, you should go over there. You can see her over there. You can see this little, not a dot, but she's sort of halfway across the field. Go talk to her."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Okay, before I do that, let me talk to everybody else that's here," because it was a stable and there's a bunch of people around.
Idea.
Yeah, and so I went in and I talked to the innkeeper, and then there was a dog, so I got the dog, gave the dog a treat, and then there's a well in back, and I explored the well. And then there was a girl who was like, "Can you help me put new tires on my cart?" So I helped her put new tires on her cart. And then I was like, what did I come here for? What was the point of this? Like, it was, at that point, 3 in-game days later, an hour and a half of my real-time life, and I could not remember what my original objective was. So I was like, oh yeah, I was going to walk across a field and talk to somebody, and I totally got sidetracked. So, that is, in general, my Tears of the Kingdom experience.
Yeah, that was me last week. I think I got to the dungeon on, like, Tuesday night, and I thought, okay, I want to, like, get at least one dungeon under my belt so I can talk about it on the next show. Clearly, that will not be a problem, because I have a week. And then I did it on Saturday. I got real close to just not doing it, because it's so easy to get distracted. So I'm really just trying to stay focused. It's kind of conflicting, because the fact that you could get distracted by stuff so easily, and there was just so much to get distracted by, was one of my favorite things about Breath of the Wild. But for some reason this time I'm just like, no, don't give me any more side quests. I really just need to get these 1 or 2 things done so I can make some actual progress in this game.
Yeah, I have to make my peace with the fact that this is like a long-term commitment. This is not a thing that I'm going to like see all of it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
or I'm not going to be able to like
slowly
finish it in time to record on Monday night. I have to sort of make my peace with the fact that I'm still going to be playing this, hopefully in 6 months, and still have not seen everything I need to see.
I've been thinking, like, this may be one of the first Zelda games where I just don't get to the end of it, because I don't know how much time that's going to take. Who knows what's going to happen to me now and then. But I feel like it should be doable. I'm not going to be setting any like speedrun records or anything.
No. Well, especially not compared to the people I see on Twitter or TikTok or whatever sharing.
Yeah,
their end game experiences.
Yeah. Okay, so wait, you said you did the first dungeon.
I've did the. You get sort of the introductory dungeon on the Cloud Island.
Yes. Sort
Yes.
of? Wait, which one are you talking about?
The Time? Temple of Time?
This is like before you even go down to the surface.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So wait, I'm not talking about that.
Okay. No, I've not done any other ones then.
Oh man. Okay, wow. Yeah, we'll see now. Well, I don't know why I was in such a hurry. We'll just talk about it next week.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because that was one of the big predictions we had, so I wanted to
gotcha. Some closure on that. Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'll do this as spoiler free as possible. So I only did one of them, and I know there are at least 3 more. And I feel like it's hard to address the prediction that we had with only the one data point, with only having done the one dungeon. So I'll try and do another one. Who knows how long that will take? But maybe we'll discuss it next week.
Okay. I'll put that on my to-do list for the coming week. We'll see how that goes.
I feel like keeping a to-do list in this game is probably a good idea, just to stay focused.
I did. I had to do that to myself because I was so all over the place in the first bunch of hours that I felt like I was, like I mentioned last week, I was missing some things that sort of felt kind of critical. I felt very weak. I felt like I didn't have I knew I didn't have the paraglider, and I didn't have any armor at that point, and I still wasn't feeling great about the whole fuse thing. Like, am I missing some critical component of this? Why does it seem so cumbersome? So
were you missing something? Did you have any epiphanies about how to better use that?
Not really, no. It's just I feel like it's sort of like early game kind of gating, because in that everything you have access to is wildly underpowered. So I'm whacking away at a bokoblin doing like 4 damage every time. And it's just, it's what you have access to early in the game, but it felt super frustrating to me. The one thing that I found that sort of did any serious damage was a bokoblin arm fused to a bokoblin arm.
Oh yeah, that was my favorite for a while.
Yeah, these are bones from a fallen skeleton bokoblin, and you can fuse them together, and it looks like a sword with a hand on the end of it, which is a little dark. And it does like 40 damage, but it's really only good for like 3 or 4 whacks before it just shatters.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's exciting, but I need something that lasts slightly longer than 3 or 4 whacks. And it's just kind of where I was at in the game. So now that I'm a little further in and I'm starting to see a little more of the world, and I've taken on some bigger enemies, not a lot of bigger enemies, but a few slightly more advanced encounters. I'm getting pickups that do much more fusion damage. So I'm getting things that do like 18, 19 damage that I can put on a handle that does 9 or 10 damage. So I'm getting it kind of into the 30s. Which feels really good. And those last for slightly more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's not good.
So I wasn't missing anything. I was just sort of frustrated by the pace at which it was sort of metering those things out to me early in the game. And it just became an incentive to, explore more, maybe avoid combat rather than trying to rush into some of these things, which is probably good advice.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, speaking of good advice, is that IGN actually posted a list of if you're feeling overwhelmed, here are some things you should do kind of in the first couple of hours.
Oh.
And it was like a walkthrough. After you go here, go to this thing and get this armor. Go to this cave and unlock this thing. And it was super helpful. It definitely sort of helped me get kind of a base kit. And at least sort of made me comfortable with kind of getting around and how to connect with people and how to use my mission log and stuff like that to remind me of what the hell am I doing here? So I really, just kind of freestyled a little bit, but worked off of IGN's skeleton list of, things you should do in the early game. And it definitely helped give me a little more focus and got me to the point where I'm at now, where I've got more hearts and feel a little more hardy and can take on some bigger challenges.
What was the most helpful tip in there?
What was the most helpful tip in there? Stuff about kind of one, how to get the paraglider, because I felt totally overwhelmed by that and couldn't figure out how to get back on the path to that. There was join the monster hunting party, because you get to do these kind of like team combat missions, essentially, where there's different factions of soldiers and villagers who have banded together and trying to rustle out some of the monster camps in the game. And you get kind of a lot of combat experience if you link up with them and sweep some of these monster camps. And then they go, hey, good job, thank you, here's a reward, and they give you some money for it. And then you get to pick up all the monster parts laying on the ground. Oh. So it was a good way to kind of fill my coffers full of things that I could use for fusion and for tinctures and things like that. So that was helpful. And then I was really kind of afraid of going into the depths, which is not a thing we've really talked about on the show. It's kind of the underground cave system in the game. It's much more than that, obviously, but that is a brief explanation for folks who are maybe not playing it. Because I'd heard it was quite difficult and that there are some crazy monsters down there. And I'm just, again, if I feel this fragile on the surface, I'm certainly not ready for the Dark Souls of Zelda experiences. But one of the things in that walkthrough was go in, at least do the early mission, because it unlocks a couple of cool things. And I'm glad I did it because it's really, really neat down there. And it got me some really cool fusion ingredients, including bomb flowers, which I love and need all of.
Oh, yeah. You gotta have a stockpile of those things.
One of those on the end of an arrow definitely sort of levels the playing field in a big combat encounter. So, yeah. It unlocks some other fun stuff, and you connect with a couple of the characters that are kind of cool. And so I'm glad I did that stuff. Otherwise, I maybe would have not kind of explored it this early in the game anyways.
Yeah. I feel like the depths were a bit overhyped to me. It may have just been like the glow of it, because I read all these impressions of them from people playing this in like the first 48 hours or so. But they were saying stuff like, oh man, I can't believe we didn't hear about these depths. It's like totally changes the game. One of the most amazing things that Nintendo has done recently. And I'm just like, after spending some time in there, I don't know if I just like haven't reached the stuff they're talking about yet. But it's fine. It's not really, I mean, it's still a cool aspect of this game. But it's not like a total like revolutionary thing, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree so far. I like when Zelda gets spooky. I think it's fun. The Lost Woods are always kind of my favorite part of a Zelda game because it's kind of trippy and dark. And Zelda, you know, I like when Zelda goes down that alley. So to have, you know, the depths be this like creepy dark thing where like, you know, possessed monsters live, and there's some cool things to discover too, and ingredients you can't get elsewhere, and the architecture of it's completely different, and it has different, you know, flora and fauna, and you know, you stumble around in the dark and trying to sort of find your way. That's cool. It's, you know, you never quite know what you're going to encounter there, but yeah, I maybe need to dig a little deeper before I you know, am as excited about it as some of the other folks are.
Yeah, I do like the sort of the fact that you're sort of blind going in there because everything is very dark and you have to light it up. I don't know. I thought it was going to be almost like this roguelike section of it, just because there's so much like it's just a very large unknown space, and like who knows what monsters could show up, but feels like it's just another sort of layer to the map. But then again, I could just not have reached the really interesting parts yet.
Could be. You'll find out in the next 100 to 200 hours.
I know. Well, and also that's another thing where I'm just like, oh man, the overworld map is already enormous. And I feel like I'm just going to have to re-explore the entire thing. Is there really just an entire second layer to it underneath? It seems mind-blowing. Maybe that's the crazy stuff that people were talking about.
That appears to be the case. Yeah, I think the depths are the same area as the space above.
Yeah. And so far, you know, it's not quite as intricate as the surface world, which is probably good because I just never finished this game. But just in terms of the ground you have to cover, it's kind of staggering. But still very cool. Oh yeah,
it's definitely. I think the developers understand the assignment and trying to sort of provide us with something new that feels unique and builds on the game that came before.
I'm surprised because they spent so much energy like hyping up the sky area, and I have spent almost no time like with the sky islands. It's like only when the plot really requires it.
I mean, until this past weekend, I couldn't figure out how to get back up there. So,
oh no,
I was like, I swear, like there's got to be a way, right, guys? I will say that our Discord has been a lot of help. We generally post a lot of like memes and funny videos that we find on the internet of people doing crazy things with the physics and tools in this game. But I have gotten some really good and helpful pointers on where to go and what to do and what certain things mean and how to use them in the Discord. So if anybody's looking for generally good advice or funny memes, you should definitely go to VGHangover.com and get a link to our Discord and come hang out with us and talk about Zelda.
Yeah, it's a good crew in there.
Should we segue into games that are not The Legend of Zelda?
Oh, do you play something besides Zelda? That is probably the most surprising thing.
Yeah. Well, I figured I couldn't just show up here and talk about the same game for another week.
Okay. So what was the other game?
The other
Majora's
game
Mask, of course.
No, I've not quite gone back to that one yet. We'll see. It's there. It's waiting for me. We'll see what happens.
All right.
Yeah. The other game I've been playing is called Planet of Lana, and this is a new game. This comes out this week. The devs were, I don't know if it was the devs, whoever the devs hire to do these things were kind enough to share download code for this in advance of release.
Nice.
This actually comes out the day that this podcast comes out on Thursday. So if this sounds interesting to you, this should be waiting for you on Steam or in the Xbox shop. So Planet of Lana is a very cool 2D adventure platforming type of thing. If you think of a game like Inside or like Little Nightmares or Far Lone Sails, where you're just doing the traditional video game thing of running to the right and jumping over obstacles and stuff, that is this game.
Yep. I was gonna say, looks a little bit like Flashback. Is it a flashback?
I guess that's probably a flashback like. But the point of reference, I think, for these is Limbo or Inside, right? In sort of modern gaming terms.
Sure.
Is that accurate? If you go back a little further, though, you end up with Flashback.
Yeah, right? Just all roads lead back to Flashback. Yeah, those actually have more in common, or the more maybe roots in sort of the Flashback cinematic platformer genre or whatever than I realized, because I kind of just forget that those exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're always it's kind of a 2D perspective, and there's some light puzzling. Those games don't really have an action component, which is was maybe for the better, as I've sort of rediscovered going back to those games and the various homages
to Flashback. You mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, like Limbo and Inside don't really have action sequences in the same way that like Flashback and Another World do.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say that certainly Limbo and Inside, it's a lot of puzzle solving. It's a lot of you sort of like stumbling into strange circumstances and weird tools and trying to figure out how it sort of like progresses the game if you use them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are like
Planet of Lana
moments of action, but it's not like the kid Inside ever draws a gun and starts shooting back at stuff.
Right. Yes. Nothing like that. Planet of Lana, I think, is a kind of an interesting hybrid of those things. In the same way, there's not like a combat system. You don't ever sort of pick up a weapon and start fighting or anything like that. But in I'll start with the hook here. The hook here is that you're a little girl who is having an excellent time running around your sort of island home neighborhood with your sister, and then the aliens come.
Oh.
Giant spaceships come out of the sky and start scooping up all your friends and loved ones. And you, because you have your wits about you and were smart enough to hide, escape initially and make it your mission to go find your sister who got scooped up by a big enemy alien spaceship spider-looking thing. It's kind of creepy. And yeah, from there the adventure begins. So you start chasing after the spaceship and trying to put clues together into where your sister was. You get a little bit of emergent gameplay about who the aliens are and why they came here. Eventually you get a little buddy. You get a little like alien hybrid cat monkey kind of thing. It's a weird little shadowy creature who follows you around. But you can point out things in the environment and places, and that he can go, he can trigger switches. He can access places that you can't get. So he has verticality. He can get up super high, and can, throw you a rope that you can climb up, and can push buttons for you and stuff like that. And you give him little directions. You can say, come to me, or stand right there. And he's super cute. His name is Mew, M-I-U, Mew.
Yeah. The monkey noise.
And for anyone who's wondering, you can pet the cat in Planet of Lana. So if you walk up to Mew and push a button, you'll get down on your knees and give him little scratches behind his ears. And
is it a cat or a monkey? Noises.
It's like a cat monkey. It's an alien thing. All of the critters in the game, because Lana's planet is not one that is Earth. It is some other off-world thing. So you get a lot of kind of Earth-like environments with very un-Earth-like animals. So you get a lot of things that look like hybrids. There's a thing that looks like a hybrid of a pig and a lion.
Okay.
And those are very scary when you run into them.
Oh, that's a bad one. It's not friendly.
That's a bad one, yes. But Mew is your buddy and helps you. Mew doesn't like getting wet, so anything that involves water, you have to go on without him and solve some puzzles and find a way to get Mew across the water and things like that. So that is where a lot of the puzzle solving comes into this. You'll find that you get to, as you're running to the right in this game, you'll get to a series of obstacles that you have to sort of navigate, where there's usually a couple of guard robots from the alien faction, something in the environment that is, electrified or on fire that you have to get around. And there's water, and you won't go in the water. So you have to use different tools and puzzle solving and giving directions to your little buddy to be able to push switches and, drop the water level and hide in the brush, because there's a lot of stealth elements to this to avoid the sentries. Eventually you get the ability to hack into some of the robot guards, and you can kind of take over them and use them to do some of your bidding, which is very satisfying and kind of fun. So that is where I think the adventure side of this kind of comes in, is that it's this sort of like world spanning, as Lana explores and tries to chase down her sister and piece together kind of the alien invasion. She goes from a bunch of different kinds of environments. You go from your island village to creepy caves. You go to like a huge, like overgrown forest kind of thing with massive trees. There's like a desert rock formation kind of area. And all of these are sort of like beautiful sweeping vistas. You get a lot of moments where you sort of stand at the top of a little mountain or something like that, and you can see kind of the alien moons. There's two of them out in the distance, and the breeze is blowing, and you get these kind of quiet moments of all the trees are shaking in the breeze and stuff like that, and it's quite gorgeous. And then you're back on the case. You're trying to run to the right again and find out what happened to your sister, and solving puzzles with your little alien cat monkey friend. So it's cool. I think, it certainly takes from many of the games that I mentioned before. I think almost so, to the point that as I was playing Planet of Lana, my partner Sarah was in the room, and she goes, "You just played this game." And I'm like, I could not have just played this game. It just came out. In fact, it's not even out yet. I'm playing it before it came out. She goes, "You were playing exactly this game a couple weeks ago." And I'm like, what is she talking about? I was playing Somerville a couple weeks ago.
Oh, you're playing Somerville. Yeah.
Which is a game that looks and plays exactly like Planet of Lana. Not exactly, but similarly too. In that game, you were also trying to survive an alien invasion.
It's a little different of your tonally, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah. Somerville's quite a bit darker, I think, as are Inside, as are Little Nightmares. Lana's a bit of a lighter affair. I mean, you are trying to rescue a family member who got abducted by aliens.
Sure.
But it doesn't quite ever get as scary or terrifying as like a Little Nightmares kind of experience. Mm-hmm. But it's really good. I like it. It does a lot of things really well. I think some of the more basic kind of rudimentary things feel kind of workmanlike. There's moments where you're sort of like, I have to get up on that ledge, and there's one box here. I can drag the box over, I'll climb on the box, and then climb up on the ledge, and I've solved the puzzle. And that none of that feels super fun. But then you get like these big set pieces where you have to like decipher alien code on the walls and put it, move different levers in different ways that open a door, and use your alien friend to, hold down a switch while you go across the room and push it, a complementary switch, and it, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those things, when you start getting to the point where some of the puzzles require 2 and 3 steps, and some real kind of hardcore planning of where am I going to go to avoid the sentry at this specific time so that I can go to the next thing. All of that stuff feels very satisfying. There's a little trial and error to it, but some of it can be very satisfying when you finally kind of get the perfect ballet of all of those things happening at exactly the right times.
What happens when you get caught by the sentry?
Normally it's kind of a one-shot kill. They electrocute you and you collapse. They can catch Mui too, which is very sad.
Oh no.
So if you send Mui out to go over there and push that button, but you don't quite get the timing right and he gets caught by the sentry, the little alien robot comes and zaps him. Meow. He makes a meow noise and you go, no, Mui. And then you fade to black and start over.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not graphic or anything like that, but if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, yeah, you work harder to keep Mui alive. That's my advice to you.
Yeah, maybe don't send him out there all on his own.
But I think it's cool to sort of see that this has kind of become its own weird little subgenre of the platformer. That this is not, you can sort of see the bones of a Mario kind of experience in this, but it's clearly doing something else. You're not bopping enemies on the head or anything like that. You're definitely still sort of doing the stuff that Mario does, jumping on platforms and yada yada, but it's kind of using that tool set in a very different way. There's not a lot of hardcore puzzle solving in a Mario platformer to sort of add that layer to an Inside or a Little Nightmares or Planet of Lana. Feels very satisfying. And to take combat out of it, to take, weapons and upgrades and all of that stuff and just sort of present you with a character who's trying to get through the world with their wits about them. That feels kind of fun and satisfying too. So it's cool to see kind of the platformer evolve into whatever this funny little subgenre is.
I might have this on my list as long as I'm just going through sort of, flashback limbo inside adjacent games. Plus, it doesn't look so cheerful, at least from the screenshots that I saw. I'm not sure about this whole robot alien sentry thing, now that you mention it.
Yeah. It's fun. I think there's a lot of really interesting design stuff that kind of happens here, and that the alien robot things feel very much like a 1950s War of the World kind of thing. They're these big chunky robots with little spindly spider legs and stuff like that, and they all have one giant red, ominous eyeball on them that emits red light, and you can't be caught in the red light, otherwise you get zapped. So there's definitely kind of fun kind of sci-fi pop culture influences that have gone into some of the design here. And the whole thing is quite striking and beautiful. So yeah, it's good. It's clearly a game that feels kind of labored over and has a lot of kind of fun influences under the hood, and is still kind of trying to do its own thing with all of that.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought and I won't spoil it for anybody. This happens very early in the game, but the actual the invasion as it happens in the game feels very much like an old school 1950s 60s sci-fi movie of an alien invasion, and it's very much staged like that too, with the way that sort of the spaceships come out of the sky and stuff. So it's cool. It's a lot of fun. It definitely pushed a lot of nerd buttons in my brain.
That sounds cool. Should check it out.
Would recommend. I'm having a really, really good time with it. I think I'm super close to the end. I have not finished it yet. I'm curious to see how it wraps up. I'll try to tone in on that, next week when we come back. But for now, would recommend checking out Planet of Lana. It comes out this week on Steam and on the Xbox.
Cool.
Yeah. It is on Game Pass. I'll mention that too, because that has been a boon for me. If you have Xbox Game Pass, Planet of Lana is included this week. So check it out if you've got that.
Nice.
That Game Pass, man, continues to pay for itself.
People love it.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Making Microsoft tons of money.
I truly don't know what I would be doing with my Xbox if I if I didn't have a Game Pass, because I have a PS5 that I almost never use, and I have to imagine my Xbox would be just about the same. And really, the best reason every single week to fire up the Xbox is to see what's new on Game Pass and to check out some of these games. It makes it so much easier to kind of sample, I think, stuff and kind of find things that click with you.
I like that sort of. I don't know. I guess sort of like the Netflix buffet model.
Yeah.
Which I think, I like in theory, but I wonder how often it would just turn into, just scrolling through everything that's on there and be like, maybe next time. Just like not in the mood for Planet of Lana right at this instant.
Yeah. I get a lot of mileage out of that, like the wish list thing in there. There's a Xbox Game Pass app. And I get a little alert, usually kind of middle of the week, going, here's what's new on the Game Pass this week. And if it sounds cool and I can watch the trailer of it right there in the app, and I'm like, sure, I'll check that out. And you put it on I think they call it the Play Next list. And it kind of holds it in reserve for you, so that when you turn on your Xbox next time, it goes, remember these games that you thought were interesting. So I think it's pretty shrewd about kind of serving you stuff that you were like, no, you said this looked cool, Randy. When are you going to play it?
That's an interesting piece of UI.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much developers love the buffet model. I think, a buffet, and I don't do a lot of buffets, but it's usually you trying a little bit of a lot of things. And as a game developer, you kind of want people to just eat your thing, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I didn't mean it as a literal buffet, but just like the sort of streaming offering model where suddenly you just have access to everything.
Yeah. But I've definitely consumed stuff on Game Pass the other way. I've played,
I just try a little of everything.
45 minutes of a bunch of different games that looked interesting to me, and nothing really clicked until one did.
See, I had a hard time doing that when I briefly had Game Pass, because it's not like it's on a streaming thing where you decide, oh, that looks cool, I'll just start watching it. You have to select it from the Game Pass list and then just start downloading it. Which, could be quick if it's a little, like, indie retro game. But if it was one of the games that I was looking to play, which, I don't know, it's probably like Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is an extreme example. It was like, oh, okay, well, this looks interesting now. I guess I will play it tomorrow as I wait for the whole thing to download and get patched up.
Yeah. You get your cooling off period. If it's come back tomorrow and still feel if it's still a good idea to play this game.
Yeah. The next morning you're just like, oh, Microsoft Flight Simulator. What was I thinking? I really wish it's been a while since I checked in on PlayStation Now or whatever they're calling it now that it's been sort of rolled into PlayStation Plus. But I thought like that was a real cool experience since everything is streaming and you can actually start playing everything more or less right away.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, I've not really experimented with any of that. I don't have my PlayStation isn't wired. It's a wireless connection, so I worry that maybe it's not quick enough to do justice to some of those gaming experiences.
Oh, wireless has come a long way since those are the PS3 days. Maybe worth giving another look.
Yeah. But the PlayStation, their tiered system is a little hard to navigate, but the tier that I'm at has served up some pretty good games that would have otherwise cost me $30 or $40. So there's still stuff in there that you can kind of mine. I just think maybe Xbox is a little smarter about kind of curating and marketing some of that stuff. In general, I sort of find that I'm paying for PlayStation, but I don't quite know what I'm getting.
Oh, absolutely. I think Microsoft definitely is being smart about it. The whole PlayStation version of it seems just like a reaction to Game Pass.
Oh, very much so.
And it's a reaction by Sony, who is not always great about sort of like thinking through their services and the actual value they're offering.
Mm-hmm. And don't get attached because it will go away eventually.
Yeah. No, everything they do just feels like whatever is most convenient for them. Like what is going to be the least amount of effort that we can put out to make it look like we're keeping up with whatever our competitors are doing.
So what have you been playing that is not Zelda?
I have been playing, man, I went back to the cinematic platformer I don't know how much stuff is in that but I ended up playing this game, The Eternal Castle, which is a remake of an old sort of adventure game from 1987. I'm going to read this blurb right off the Steam page because I feel like they do a good job of explaining it. It says, The Eternal Castle Remastered is an ambitious attempt to modernize an old classic in order to keep its memory alive. Through detailed research and hard work, the production team tried to expand the experience of the 1987 original while keeping the same feel and emotional flow of the 1987 masterpiece. So it's definitely in the vein of something like Another World and Flashback, and maybe even Inside and Limbo, where you're just a character that walks to the right and takes care of like occasional puzzles and very light platforming. You know the drill. It's very much in that mold. The premise in this takes place in the future. Earth has just been destroyed by, wars and you know the drill. Kind of like just nuclear fallout, everything.
This all sounds very familiar, yeah.
Yeah. And now, the space colonies, the last place where humanity is able to exist, are running out of resources. So they sent all these scouts back to Earth to see if there's anything left. And one of the most recent scouts, I believe, has not been heard of in a while. They haven't checked back in. So your mission is to go back to Earth and find out what happened to them. And you do this by going through all these sort of like post-apocalyptic landscapes and weird sort of like spooky laboratories for some reason, trying to gather clues and find this scout. What caught my eye about this, not just that it is a cinematic platformer, is that it's like one of the most visually incredible games that I've seen. It's done, like it talks about it being a remake of this game from 1987, and I guess partly because of that, it is in this like extremely limited like 4-color palette. Which, like, if you played PC games back then, it's probably very familiar. It's like the black and white and like teal and magenta palette. It still looks like that, but clearly the like engine under the surface has been modernized. I should get something out of the way, actually. So it's clearly not a remastering of an actual game. It's just the developers are leaning real hard into this angle of like, oh, there's this classic game from 1987 that you've never heard of, and we have unearthed it and restored it for this version. So it is a new game that they have created. But I love how much they're just sticking with this whole bit. Like, the Steam page does not let on that it is a new game. They're just like, oh yeah, we did a lot of research on this game and really tried to like modernize it. But no, they just made this like 3 years ago. So I love that about it.
That's clever.
So there's a lot of stuff in this game where it feels like you boot it up, or you like launch it from the Switch menu, which is what I did, and it shows basically a DOS launch sequence where it's showing a bunch of like command line stuff happening. It's like, oh, ready to launch eternalcastle.exe or whatever it says. And it's all part of just this sort of pseudo retro experience. And then you load it up and it's just got the 4 colors, but it's obviously just like a color filter and sort of like a pixel filter over some sort of 3D animation happening. But it looks incredible. It looks sort of like the like rotoscoped animation from Another World or Flashback. And it was sort of like seeing those again for the first time. Like, oh man, I didn't realize a game could look like this. Like, it's impossible that this game existed in 1987 and had this type of animation and just like fluidity. But it's a really, really striking effect in this version. Or in this version, being the only version of this game that exists. And that's where the experience, I feel like, drops off quite a bit, because then it just turns into this sort of incomprehensible cinematic platformer, very much like Another World, where it's like, oh man, this looks like the coolest game I've ever played. I don't know what to do, and everything is like inscrutable. I have no idea how to do any of these puzzles, and the action is terrible. but I just feel compelled to keep pushing on through this game because it's just so unique looking. Like I mentioned, all the environments are just on this post-apocalyptic Earth, and the sort of like grittiness of the art style and whatever they're actually able to render using these 4 colors and just huge pixels just really works well with the atmosphere. It really feels just like run down and like dangerous and mysterious. There's this section where it's like, I guess it's supposed to be a stealth section where you can crouch down and hide in the shadows, which just looks great because like your character will kneel down and all you will see is sort of like the rim lighting around the outline of the character. And they're like other spooky characters they're supposed to be avoiding walking around in the foreground. And just like every screen of this game, I kind of had to stop and like just like take it in or save a screenshot or something like that because it just looks incredible. But gameplay wise, very, very clunky.
No, that's too bad.
Very frustrating. It would be great if it was just your character walking to the right and occasionally climbing on something, perhaps, and solving a puzzle. But for some reason, there are just so many action sequences. And I've talked about, like, I went back to Flashback recently, and no, the action's not very good in those games. The action in Another World was horrific most of the time, from what I remember. And despite the little note in the sort of fake, like, oh yeah, we made a lot of effort to modernize the game and bring it up from those 1987 game design standards, it's a pretty rough experience. It still very much plays like, the action out of Flashback. Or like Lunark even, which is, came out this year. And I was like, well, they didn't modernize the combat enough because it's still very much stuck in like sort of a barely playable state. And it's unfortunately very frustrating. I would love it if you just spent the whole rest of the game sort of exploring these maps and seeing these cool environments and occasionally solving a puzzle. But I find, the fact that there's so many places where you just get chased by stuff, and I wasn't sure how to deal with them. There's a section I just did recently where you're essentially storming some stronghold. And you have to deal with enemies approaching you in front, and there's like a sniper up on this tower who is also just aiming at you the whole time. And I could not decipher what you were supposed to do in this sequence, because it seems like you were supposed to take out the enemies in front of you, but occasionally, like, the sniper would just headshot you, and you'd go back to the checkpoint. And I tried a whole bunch of things, like staying in cover, but then, the enemies can just shoot you even though you're behind cover, which I thought was counterintuitive. It's very mysterious. I almost wonder if I was approaching some of the sequences in this like from the completely wrong angle, because like in Out of This World or Another World, I don't know if you played that game.
I think I've played one of these. I don't know which. I have a sort of vague memory in my brain of you describing happening, and I've seen screenshots, and I'm like, oh, I've played this before, but I don't know specifically what game it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That game is it was initially very misleading because you, like, early on, you get this laser gun, and you're like, oh, great, now I have a laser gun. Now it's just an action game. But it very much is not. You just use the laser gun at very specific points when the game sort of puts you into a combat situation. And the rest of the game is more like the Limbo style sort of like puzzle platformer. So I was wondering, like, am I not supposed to just run into the stronghold and, shoot the enemies?
Shoot some bad guys, yeah.
Because I feel like, I don't see an alternative path through this. And there's this sniper kind of putting this time pressure on me. So I really don't understand what is happening. And I don't know how much of that is intentional. I don't know how much of it you're just supposed to like sit down and sort of puzzle out and determine the best route through everything through trial and error. But I was really not having a great time with that aspect of the experience.
I was wondering as you were describing that if like the kind of jankiness of it was meant to be some sort of like bid at like 1980s authenticity.
That occurred to me. Yeah. Like maybe it's just bad on purpose, but I feel like that's not a good approach to game design.
Well, particularly if not in their Steam page, they're bragging about sort of updating it and modernizing it. Why does it still play like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, here's the thing. I didn't think Lunark played especially well, but that was like, oh yeah, we really tried to recreate that authentic gameplay. It's just like, I don't know, this is a great thing to be basing your game around.
Mission accomplished, guys.
Yeah, so it's questionable. I don't know if people just go for that. I don't know if they want to sort of like min-max these action encounters over and over until they just happen to get lucky. The like sniper misses the headshot and your character cooperates and shoots where you're aiming every time. It's very mysterious. But still, I continue to just make my way through it. It's not an incredibly long game, it seems like, but I just had to take frequent breaks because it's so frustrating. I just want to get to the next area and see what's going on there because it's so just mysterious and weird. And I wish other games would sort of use this aesthetic because it's very cool.
Yeah, this color palette is pretty striking. You can't really mistake it for anything else.
It's great. I gotta find a clip of just the intro sequence because yeah, it just looks amazing. It doesn't work great for the rest of the game either in terms of just like being sort of like legible, but it does look very cool as you're moving your character around and he's just a little clump of pixels, sort of dipping in and out of the shadows. And clearly there's like some kind of sophisticated lighting happening because there'll be like writing on the walls at points that appear or disappear as like lighting shifts in the scene, which just, it all looks amazing under this 4-color filter. So I kind of wish there was just like a god mode or something so I could just go through slowly and, you know, be a tourist in this weird world. But everybody keeps shooting at me, so that's very frustrating. Anyway, that is the Eternal Castle Remastered out on Steam and Switch and various platforms. I think I've got another hour to go through it, so I'm just going to see if I can, see if I can deal with it. But definitely worth checking out the trailer for. Probably not my new favorite cinematic platformer as I was hoping it might be, but man, I like that people are just making weird stuff like this. It's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is cool that all these years later that, there seems to be sort of this, inspirational tribute subgenre that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool.
And I really love the sort of fake remastering take on it, too. That's just so, inspired. And I don't know if it really, if they play on it anymore other than just using it as an excuse to produce a game that looks like this. But it's very interesting.
There's it reminds me of and I'm going to get some of the details wrong here, and I'll do a little research to make sure that I can drop a link in the show notes that sort of explain the story. But Playdate, the folks who make the Playdate console, have a podcast, and they talk about do kind of deep dives into some of the games and what development of it was like. And early on, it was like what was making the console like and stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's really well produced too. It has kind of that NPR kind of quality to it. It feels very narrative. They had a recent episode where it started with sort of this story of finding like a floppy disk that they had put in a box after a PC gaming conference in 1987, and found that it had kind of the root of a very rudimentary video game, and they sort of extrapolated on that and turned that kind of humble origin into a cool Playdate game, this puzzle game that is now playable in 2023 on the Playdate. And later in the podcast, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool story. And they interview people and how they made the music, and they had the original theme, and they kind of remixed it and expanded on it to make it, for the new game, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, this is really, really neat. I can't believe this game had these origins in 1987. And at the end of the podcast, they admit that's not true.
Oh, no.
None of that actually happened. That we just wanted to make a game that sort of felt like that. So we created this narrative around it that would make it sort of feel like this found thing. And I apologize to our listeners if I'm ruining the story for you. I'm not sure how many people are invested in the Playdate ecosystem, but I was super into it. And at the end, I was like, oh, guys, really? I suckered in. But I will find that exact link to the Playdate podcast episode, and I'll drop a link to that in our show notes if anybody's interested in hearing it now that I've ruined the end. But it's cool, and it's definitely worth checking out. They did a nice job with it.
Did you play the game?
I did, yeah. I played the game. It's cool. It's like you use the crank on the Playdate to like essentially in a lot of ways play kind of Arkanoid, where it's circular. So you're cranking around the outer rim of kind of a brick breaker game.
Okay.
It's not nearly as inspired as the podcast would lead me to think it is, but it was fun and satisfying, and I think it used the crank in a way, and that's kind of perfect actually. Yeah. I need to talk about more Playdate games, actually, because I think I secretly play through some of those a little bit every couple of weeks, and then I don't talk about them on the show.
I was wondering what happened to that thing. Man, that story got you to play the game at least. So
it did. It totally did. Yep.
Good marketing angle.
And it's one of the I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's just a code. It's like I don't want to get it wrong, but I'll put it in the show notes if anybody's interested. But
okay.
Yeah, it's effective marketing. It totally got me suckered in, and I tried it out.
Yeah, similar reaction just reading the Steam page for the Eternal Castle, because I was just like, wait a minute, I've never heard of this game, but it looks super cool. It looks like something I'd be into. Like, is this a real game? And they're just so consistent in everything on the Steam page about they stick to their story that yes, that in fact did come out in 1987 to the point where there are a bunch of threads in the Steam discussions where like, is this a real thing? You guys just making stuff up? It's really real good.
Nice. Cool. I love that. It's like the Blair Witch Project approach to marketing. It's sort of like, oh, it really happened.
Yes. Blair Witch is real, though, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Those people never came back.
Oh, man.
Let's wrap this thing up. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. You can join us on Discord, hang out with us, chat about video games. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And it would help us immensely if you would rate, review, subscribe, all of those things on your podcasting app of choice. And maybe help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, that'd be great. Help us get the word out about the show. Bring in some new listeners. We really appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
We'd like to give thanks again to Fear of Dark for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of his work, you can go to fearofdark.bandcamp.com. Add all those albums to your cart and hit checkout. That'd be amazing.
Cool. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.